Today, I have a fabulous topic: turn customer experience into revenue, the lessons from secret shopping. And I have my great friend, Tom Finnegan. Tom's an icon in our industry. He's a principal at Stratmor. He wrote a chapter that's great in Mortgage Manager Mastery. So I'm excited to have Tom with me today. So hi, Tom.
Good morning, Pat. How are you?
Great. So I love this topic because you and I have discussed this before, that we don't see a lot of accountability of what is the customer experience. So let's talk about secret shopping. What is it and how do you do it before we jump into the nitty-gritty about it?
Absolutely. So, secret shopping is, in a general sense, it's,
Hmm.
having a process by which management can test the actual customer experience by sending people in to actually apply for a mortgage in the case of mortgage,
Hmm.
or experience what the customer experiences themselves when they go in for a mortgage application. This is not, of course, just germane to the mortgage business. One of our interesting experiences that we looked at when we were developing our secret shopping is the fact that Five Guys Burgers uses secret shopping almost exclusively to, rather than advertising, to
Yeah.
see what's happening in their various locations, and they reward people based on their results from secret shopping. So they're secret shopping all their locations all the time. And what we found is that in the mortgage business, typically practitioners, whether it be banks or independent mortgage bankers, haven't really been doing that. And so at
Wow.
Stratmor, we've taken that concept and made it part of our practice. So we now are engaging in secret shopping on behalf of clients, on a
Hmm.
continuous basis.
So are you physically going, in other words, how are you doing the contacting? What does it look like for the mortgage industry?
It depends what the customer, what the client wants.
Hmm.
We do have we have available to us
Hmm.
5,000 or so people around the country who can
Oh, wow.
actually physically go into locations if that's the intended way that the client would like us to do it. Oftentimes, one of our guy that leads this practice at Stratmor, Brett McCracken, he oftentimes will do the shop himself in a case where the shop is conducted over the phone. Call in at
Hmm.
be a customer who's moving into the area, for example, and find a mortgage loan officer either
Hmm.
via the website or the call in, and then just see what happens. So it can be either a physical face-to-face shop or a phone
Hmm.
shop. Yeah.
But it's not surveys, which I think the industry really is doing all the time.
No, no, people do surveys, and we're not against surveys, certainly at
Yeah,
Stratmor. It's
yeah,
just that it can be enlightening and we're in the survey business ourselves, of course, with our uh,
yeah.
mortgage MCX, we call it, mortgage customer experience surveys. But no, this is an adjunct to surveys where you actually live the process and not just talk to
Mhm.
customers who already have a mortgage with you after the fact via the survey.
So, as a whole, would you say it's big lenders, middle tier lenders, or is it more bank-like, or who is it that's interested in seeing this?
It's really been everybody. It's interesting.
Hmm.
For large lenders, they want to secret shop their own operations, and they also want to often shop the competition, to
Hmm.
contrast,
Hmm.
their own experience with what they view to be their main competition is. We do a lot of this work for our bank clients, though, as well. I've made it in my consulting work with community banks. Particularly, I've made it part of at their shops, and the results have been enlightening and really an important part of their planning efforts, so they can address or start to address what's going on with their own sales forces. So it's really and independent mortgage banks are often shopping, large
Hmm.
swaths of their own sales force and making it part of their rewards package as well. So yeah.
So, what typically is generating when a lender decides that I need to look at secret shopping?
We sometimes plant the seed,
Sure.
because they haven't really thought
Hmm.
about it. And when you ask, "Have you ever done this, or have you ever thought about it?" Typically the answer is no. Even to the extent that they haven't maybe even gone on their own website to experience the click-throughs and so on to see if the darn thing works. So we actually plant the seed, but once we do that, then it really starts to take hold, especially when the management of the bank or mortgage banker starts to see the early results from our activities. And, the big thing is that more often than not, what management believes is happening
Yeah.
uh, with their sales force in terms of serving customers. When you
Hmm.
test it via secret shopping, it's not actually happening. So
So did the lender, in other words, how do you decide what percentage of the people what percentage of an institution will be secret shopped? In other words, is there some formula you use that, all right, if you have 100 loan officers, as an example, we're going to secret shop all of them, or is it some percentage of them?
no, it's usually a lower percentage. For one thing, there is a cost, not free, so there is
Sure, you sure?
a
Hmm.
cost factor to this. But you can get a pretty good sense, and we work with a client to figure this
Sure.
out. But for example, I have a bank client where we started just recently here with a half dozen secret shops. Their sales force is maybe 20 people, okay,
Gotcha.
25 people. And we started with a half dozen secret shops, but I just got word that they want to do all their entire sales force next year as part of their
Yeah.
ongoing process improvement work. So, it can gravitate from a small percentage to,
Yeah.
a much larger percentage if they want to make it part of their overall evaluation of talent. But again, you can get a pretty solid understanding of what's
Sure.
going on at organizations. What we do a lot of times, Pat, is we'll say when working with our client, we'll say, let's survey or let's secret shop a couple of your best, who you believe to be your best
Hmm.
performers,
Hmm.
and then do a couple who you think are at the bottom rung,
Hmm.
and compare and contrast the experience with those
Hmm.
people. You know,
So, so we know that lenders do these famous surveys, these written surveys
yeah,
that I
right.
think, but I'm curious when you're doing this secret shop and they find out that what that actually is really being said, it can be so different than what the surveys are showing. And is that something that you find normally or is there some disconnect?
Well, I think, yeah, the surveys oftentimes are geared to how was your experience with the loan officer personally? Did the loan
Sure.
officer treat you well? Or in the case of the Stratmor survey, how was your experience with the back office? We go even
Hmm.
deeper and go into the back
Hmm.
office. But that is, testing just the mortgage transaction in effect. What we're
Sure.
finding out in secret shopping is that the other potential value components of being in the mortgage business, particularly for banks, aren't happening. There's no, is the loan officer discussing other bank products and services that the customer might be able to take advantage of?
Okay.
Are they asking a question around, are you working with a realtor? And if not, making that handoff to a realtor that you're looking to generate business from. Those kind of questions are important to getting more business over the long run for the institution. But a survey would never be able to attack those questions, surveying the borrower, because they don't have, they're not thinking along those lines.
So that does raise the question about what is the typical when when you're doing a secret shop and they're going in person or whatever, what's the time span that they're spending with their question sequence? Is it a half an hour or is it 10 minutes?
Yeah, to do it well, we think it's a 20 to 30-minute
Sure.
process. Okay.
Hmm.
Oftentimes, now the LO may try to make it a 10-minute process. And
Sure, sure.
oftentimes what they do is they'll say, well, thanks, Mr. Smith, go to our website and do an application. You do your application, and then let me know when you're done with that. So they almost try to shorten the process where, if you're going to do a consultative type selling
Hmm.
and touch all the bases that we think you should, then you're looking at a 20 to 30-minute process. You can't start the process with a little bit of banter and
Sure.
get to know the person and then explore their particular financial situation to help you be a coach, as Dave
Yeah.
Savage might say in Mortgage Coach. You got to coach with the borrower to get them in the right product and to make sure that you're doing what's best for that client, that has to be a process that takes a little bit of time.
I guess in the big picture. So,
Mhm.
what happens when the loan officer finds out he's been shopped and the person isn't actually a transaction?
But, we don't actually have a lot of data on that. In fact, when certainly for dissemination within an organization, we don't put names to it. Now,
Oh, okay,
we
sure.
do that for the manager who commissioned us, the president of the bank or the head
Yes,
of
okay.
mortgage or whoever, we do that. But we don't typically suggest that in our output, we don't mention the person's name, okay? I think as organizations find out that or their sales force finds out that the organization is in fact secret shopping them, I
That's
think
right.
I think that it can sharpen people's, you know,
Skill sets,
method of
sure.
operation, because we're fairly new at it. I don't think we have a lot of data on,
Hmm.
over time, how does the secret shopping experience impact the loan officer sales force itself. But I mean, I think its tendency is to sharpen up the performance of the people who believe they
Yeah,
might be secret shopped. Again, I think it leads to things though, like from a management standpoint, if you want loan officers to behave in a particular way,
right.
then you have to teach them and train them
Mm.
how you want them to behave. I mean, and what we see is that, yeah, it's you might say, well, these loan officers are terrible. They're not going through any of the steps, that we think you should. But have they ever been taught what the institution really wants to see happen?
Mm-mm.
At a mortgage loan application. Generally speaking, I would say no. The sales management is more focused on, what are you doing today to get the next lead and so on, but they're not as focused on the mechanics of the customer experience and how they're pulling that off. So I think it's an awareness standpoint on the part of bank or mortgage company management to say, here's what we're trying to do when we interact with a customer. We're not
Hmm.
just taking the mortgage application, but we're trying to be a consultant. In the case of a bank, we're trying to make them this is a lead product for us. We're
Sure.
trying to make them a customer of the bank. We
Mm.
want you to obviously build up your external referral sources. So part of this is partnering better with realtors if the customer does not have a realtor that they're working with. So all those elements have to be taught and trained to the sales force.
Well, that's one of my favorite topics, and I have to
Okay.
tell you that there's a disconnect.
Yeah.
And because it's commission sales, I think a lot of times the lender, whether it's a bank or anybody, that they just they look at you're on your own, go out and do your own thing, and we'll hope for the best. Is kind of what you do definitely
Yeah.
see. But I think
Right.
those days are coming to an end for sure. I'm interested when you have presented these findings. What are the executives saying? So,
Well, they don't. I think they play it a little bit close to the vest, but the example I just used, where a bank wants to go back and do even more secret shopping next year, indicates that they found it valuable and were
sure.
surprised. Okay,
Hmm.
with the findings. So I think it's a little touchy because obviously the people who commissioned the work are responsible for
Right.
for the enterprise, and maybe it's not happening quite the way they thought. But on the other hand, it becomes a win-win, if they can wind
Sure.
up,
Yeah.
because the quest for everybody is, how do I do more business? Okay. And
Yeah. Yes. Hmm.
that they seem like it's difficult these days to do that. Do I need
Hmm.
more products? Do I need,
Sure.
what do I need to do to generate more business? And when in point of fact, if your sales force just behaved in a little bit different way when reacting to customer
Yes.
inquiries and doing follow-up, there's a lot of business that is being lost to the competition just through not executing properly when
Right.
interacting at first with the customer. It's free new business basically
Yeah.
if you can train to it, and that's the best kind. Get productivity out of your existing staff.
I'm curious, and I just had this conversation yesterday with a lender, and
Mhm.
I see it prevalent in the bank sides and actually in the independent mortgage side too. But it's always under the belief that the development side, if I do that and I pay the cost, then they'll leave me. I mean, I just hear this every day in 2026. And so what you're really kind of doing is showing here's the before case. If you did something about it, you'll have a different after case. Have you had enough before and after cases that you can show like, wow, this lender really improved because they focused on it?
Well, I think we're building that over time.
Yeah.
Again, it's fairly new to us, but
Sure.
I'm quite confident that they'll,
Yes.
I mean, we do the secret shop and we give them the results. What
Yeah.
they do with it,
Yeah.
internally, and how they enhance their training program, and
Yeah.
what they do on an ongoing basis is not always something that we're quite as attached to as the original secret shop. But we are engaged with customers now over the long run on this, partnering with them over time, as I mentioned. And I think we'll start to develop the case, that
The before and
improvement in the
after.
way the loan officers behave can lead to a
Hmm.
stronger business. I mean, again, if in terms of people leaving, if loan officers don't want to learn how to do their own business, well, they're commissioned salespeople. I mean, this is the
Yeah.
part that actually amazes me. Why wouldn't you want to do things that can likely lead to more business and more money for you? I mean, one of the biggest things that we see in the secret shops, in this case, I'll pick on some banks here, but is the follow-up close on the initial interview, and then the follow-up is almost non-existent. Our secret shopper the person again will say, go to the website and apply, but there's no follow-up, there's no email after the
Yeah.
meeting, there's no
Yeah.
attempt to set an appointment
Hmm.
for a follow-up
Hmm.
discussion. That doesn't happen. Well, that person 9 times out of 10 is going to walk away, if
Hmm.
you don't follow up. So again, I don't see why that would be objectionable on the part of loan officers who
Yeah.
are making money based on doing the next loan. So
Sure.
I think that has to be the pitch from bank or mortgage company management. Hey, we're doing this to help us and you,
Hmm.
do more business and make you more money in the process.
So are you seeing differences between when you're doing secret shopping between banks and independent mortgage bankers and also I guess credit unions? Has there been differences or is it the same plight for all of them?
Well, it's not exactly the same play, although the basics of the interview
Hmm.
process and how to handle the customer experience itself is the same or very similar. The difference typically, though, is in the area of cross-selling or pitching,
Yeah, sure.
the bank's other
Mm.
products and services, which is typically an objective for banks is being in the business,
Yes.
but is
Hmm.
not one for
Hmm.
independent mortgage companies. So again, and that's sometimes hard for banks to do because again, the old barriers between mortgage originators and retail, they may not understand the product set, but you have to also develop the relationships with the retail bank to enable that process to occur seamlessly so that it's an easy sell for the loan officer when they're talking to the customer to dive into their overall financial profile, which again, if you're being a consultative seller, you want to do
Right.
that anyway. What are your
Yeah.
assets? Where do you bank currently? Those sorts of things that can lead to the discussion about becoming a customer
Hmm.
of the bank overall. But again, that's the biggest difference. The basic skill set
Still the
of
same.
how to do the interview is the same. Yep.
Yeah. So share with our audience today, you already talked about one of the gaps about no follow-up. What are some of the other big gaps that you see kind of across the board so far on your secret shopping?
Well, one is oftentimes the loan officer assumes that the person wants a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. Okay.
Yeah.
There's no discussion about how long they're going to be in the area. Would
Hmm.
an adjustable rate or a shorter term fixed rate loan do the job? It's not brought up. Another one is that again, sort of along those same lines, the loan officer doesn't drive the conversation. They ask
Hmm.
questions, but it's the customer that has to sort of feed information. Process is not driven by the loan officer during the interview. So that's typically a miss. Again, timing, when are you moving in? If you're moving a new person moving into an area, what's your timeline?
Wow.
They don't ask that. How about, again, I mentioned this previously, but are you working with a realtor?
Yeah.
They don't ask that.
Yeah.
Oftentimes they don't immediately ask about credit. Now on secret shopping, it's a little difficult because again, this isn't a real person, that's
Sure. Mhm.
doing the secret shopping, but they don't ask even, do you understand what your credit looks like? It's important for me to think about
Mhm.
what product you should go in and so on. They don't ask,
Yeah.
about credit.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things they don't, perhaps set the stage properly in terms of initial banter. What we see a lot of times is the loan officer will engage in banter, sort of in conversation with the client. It doesn't have anything to do with the loan interview. They'll start talking
Uh,
about the vacation they went on,
yeah.
last year, and it was a lot of fun and so on. Have you ever been on that vacation? Well, that's wonderful, but it doesn't do anything to
Yeah.
advance the loan process. And again, I think the call to action, the next steps, the follow
Oh,
up, as I
yeah.
mentioned, is definitely missing a very high percentage of the time, and it's a very important part of the process. So,
Right. Yeah. I'm not surprised at all that you're saying it's too much rapport building. It's
yeah,
good to have it in the beginning, but and what the research shows it shouldn't be any more than 2 minutes, you
yeah,
know.
correct,
Yeah, instead they make it the whole half hour. So I
right.
definitely see that. I am curious and I wonder, do you see where is there a difference in secret shopping results between the successful originators and the others? Have you seen correlations with that at all?
Yeah, I think there's some correlation,
Yeah,
but again, but the successful loan officers, it's not that they don't have areas that they can improve. Okay.
sure.
So,
No,
so there's
right.
there's opportunity for everybody. Yes, there's some correlation. I mean, especially where, the client might say, well, shop Jane Smith here because she's not doing a very good job for us. And that will come out
Yeah,
in the interview. They
right.
get a low score because they're just not. Well, another thing I should mention too is the importance of the initial response. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
A person may call in and ask for an appointment or go to the website. And, we see, obviously good lenders, maybe who have been more schooled on how it's done in consumer direct, where leads are
Hmm.
fed to a team of loan officers who are
Sure.
trying to call back immediately. But where you're
Yeah.
dealing with a retail type structure, that response to the customer inquiry can take anywhere from 2 hours to three
Wow.
days,
Yeah. Yeah.
or none. Well, 3 days doesn't work. That
Yeah.
customer is
Gone on to somebody
has
else.
gone on to
Yeah.
the next opportunity in that time. So that one is also a very important part of the shop. How
Yeah.
fast could we get in contact with the customer? And again, the loan officers oftentimes behave sort of in a cavalier manner. Well, if it's Monday, could we talk on Thursday? Well, why would you
Yeah.
do that?
Yeah.
You got to
Yeah.
talk today,
Yeah.
to get that accomplished.
Yeah. I love this topic. I have to have you come back, talk more about it. But do you want to share any takeaways today for our listeners regarding how important it is to do secret shopping because surveys just don't do it
Yeah.
anymore?
I'd say the big takeaway is surveys are important, but it's not the end all be all.
Mm-hmm.
You have to understand what's going on in terms of the process itself. And one way to do that, a good way to do that, is through the secret shopping, especially as it relates to the performance of loan officers and that part of your process. You can do that. You can do it internally, if you choose, but Stratmor does offer this capability, and it's not, we've gotten better at this over the last 2 or 3 years, and it's not that expensive. As I mentioned, we can do that as part of an overall engagement relative to planning and process improvement. And so, a big takeaway is don't dismiss this. Get involved and understand what's going on in your own shop in terms of how the loan
Mm-hmm.
officers performed. And as I mentioned, there's other ways to shop your process too. I mentioned the website. Go to your own website
Yeah.
and see what happens. Click through
Mm-hmm.
the screens and see if you like the result that you're seeing doing that. So those to me are the big takeaways, and it can, I think, through for reasonable cost, if you work with Stratmor on it, you can get a lot of bang for that in terms of improvement, perhaps not just customer experience, but actual loan volume itself. So.
Yeah, I think I need to hire to have you do it because I see this is all the time that there's a disconnect between the lender recognizing that they have to develop their staff. It's for sure. So, Tom, how can people get a hold of you to discuss this? And I highly recommend that you reach out to him. He's has a wealth of knowledge.
Absolutely. So you can reach out to us at Stratmor Group on our website, stratmorgroup.com. or you can call me directly at 614-638-3795, or
Mhm.
talk to anybody at Stratmor who can get you to the right place to begin this process. Again, our lead practitioner here on this is a guy named Brett McCracken, who's
Mhm.
an associate with us, so you can reach out to Brett too.
Well, I want to thank you, Tom, for sharing all this information. I think it's a fascinating service, and I think it needs to be done by more lenders for sure. And I want to thank all our listeners for listening today. And each Monday, we do issue a new podcast, and certainly subscribe to them. And Tom is also one of our lead authors in the Mortgage Manager Mastery. So thanks so much, Tom.
You're most welcome. As always, I enjoy it, Pat. Thanks.
Check out my new book, Mortgage Manager Mastery, where 23 mortgage sales leaders shared their best practice in managing sales staff. The book is available on Amazon and Kindle or paperback.